we're not sitting here and saying, even though he's a top 50 prospect to us, take him 47th overall.
Right.
But again, if you listen to our show, which I hope you do, he's somebody absolutely. Arizona Cardinals use a top 30 selection on him. It's a name that's worth watching for a good reason.
Can the Arizona Cardinals fortify their offensive line and get on the defensive trenches as well while checking in on a local superstar? PHNX Cardinals. Make sure you subscribe to PHNX Sports here on YouTube. It's our PHNX Cardinals Top 100 NFL Draft Prospects. Of course, you can find it. Go PHNX.com. Become a diehard today at a low price. Of course, we've got the 100 through 51, Johnny Venerable. We checked in last night. Today, we're going to check in on actually 50 through 31 before we get into the top 30 there. You know, some hidden gems last night where now I think you're getting into some guys that you want to make an impact in 2025.
Yeah, and we talk about the early picks likely being reserved, at least right now, for front seven players. I mean, 47, depending on, who you subscribe to. Monty Ossenford said BPA. 47 for the Arizona Cardinals could very well be BPA, Bo. When you think about the kind of talent that may or may not be there, defensive line talent, you wonder, can it stretch to 47? Will the Cardinals get their pass rusher early, and will it allow them to pivot maybe to the offensive line at 47, Bo?
Yeah, and we leaned into the strength of this draft at the top of the draft. If you look at our rankings, there's a ton of defensive front seven players in there that slid up the board just by necessity, need. When you start to look at a couple notes here, the quarterbacks, like we've got Cam Ward way down the board here, Johnny, at 35. We've got Jackson Dart below that. We've got Shedeur Sanders below that in 50s, just because as far as the Arizona Cardinals go, it's not going to be a priority for them, especially with the addition of Jacoby Brissett. Do they find somebody developmental? And I think the biggest key in this draft, because it's such a weak quarterback class, you're not going to have the luxury of getting those guys where they should probably be drafted. So not a big conversation there. I don't know if you want to say anything about Jackson Dart or Cam Ward. Like Cam Ward's like the most untouchable guy in this draft. Why even discuss him? He's 1-1. But Jackson Dart, any thoughts on him?
No, I mean, again, I think the narrative of him going in the first round, when you've got questions now, will Shedeur Sanders be a top 10 pick, I think was a little bit naive maybe in the back end. Picks 20, 25, 30, around that range, I think is kind of his ceiling, but certainly would not surprise either one of us if he's remaining on day two. And this is groupthink NFL. So the minute this guy begins to fall, then it leads to the other 31 general managers to say, well, if that team doesn't like him, why should we? And again, it's a kid who didn't have a lot of fanfare during the college football season. Is he another Kenny Pickett, a la a couple of years ago with that subpar class where, outside of Cam Ward, and there's questions about him, like, will this class be worth its salt, the quarterback? Or is everybody just kind of ready to chalk it up as a lost cause? I would have no problem taking Jackson Dart if you're the Arizona Cardinals. If they loved him, we have no idea. We, top 30 visits here nor there. 47 beyond would be good value, as we've talked about. But I think his sweet spot is probably the tail end of the first to get that fifth-year option.
Yeah, let's get into some prospects that we think the Cardinals could be in on. And we'll start by looking at somebody at the new Arizona Cardinals offensive line coach in a national championship performance. 50th overall on our board, Donovan Jackson, maybe too low.
Yeah.
I'm the one that put together the rankings here for the most part, along with a lot of your help. But I might have ranked Donovan Jackson too low. Versatile offensive lineman, probably projects as a guard at the next level. 6'3.5", 315 pounds. He's got long enough arms, 33.5 just about. Donovan Jackson, he was a guy that played inside but booted outside with the injury to Josh Simmons. I think somebody that it's easy to connect the dots with Justin Frye and the Cardinals.
Yeah, I think people connect the dots with a Tyler Booker. I think this is much more likely. If the Cardinals are going to go guard beyond pick 16, he was the number one guard coming out of high school, 20th player in his class. And as you mentioned, it's got versatility, scheme versatility. So, if they were feeling it and Justin Frye recommends it, maybe you try him at right tackle, or maybe you just say, we're going to plug him in at left guard for hopefully the next 10 years and prosper. According to our guy, Fran Duffy, technique-wise is probably his biggest area for improvement, can be up and down. But, just like a lot of these early round guards, he's got power for days, heavy-handed punch, can jab defenders on contact. When he latches onto rushers, he sticks. He's a better pass protector than he is run blocker. It's somebody that, again, 47 would have no issue with that. And I think our ranking was pretty fair given like the positional value where maybe the Cardinals would take him. I think if this was in years prior and they had a top 40 selection, maybe he's in play there, but you're certainly not going to take him at 16. I don't think he's a first round pick. I think if Simmons didn't have the injury, I think he's a firm top 20 pick.
Yeah.
I think his injury pushes him down, obviously, which subsequently, fair or not, pushes the rest of this position unit down for Ohio State. I think it's a solid top 50 prospect right now.
No doubt about it. If he was somebody you could say, hey, this guy's a tackle at the next level, and then I think it's a slam dunk. But then since he's, does he kick inside? Is he a versatile guy? Is a Swiss Army knife? Is that somebody you want to utilize a top 50 pick on? Probably a little rich as far as that goes. But if they don't tap in on Simmons, if they don't look at somebody within those first two picks on the offensive line, I definitely think Donovan Jackson, if he's there, around 78 would make a whole lot of sense just to reconnect, easy connecting the dots. Also is one connecting the dots. The next player we're going to talk about, one we've talked about a lot, maybe ad nauseum for some of you out there, Cam Skattebo, the Arizona State hero, of course, just unbelievable run, leading the Sun Devils to the Peach Bowl, and then that performance in there kind of spoke for itself. 4.65 40 at his private workout. You couple that with a pretty decent in the top, 95 percentile vert and 39.5, and a broad jump over 10 feet, 3 inches. Size, Johnny, 5'9", 219 he checked in on, but it's really the productivity at the collegiate level that people fall in love with.
Yeah, I think the best compliment you can give him is I think he's greatly superseded his talent. And then you think about ASU, speaking of lack of talent, I mean, this is year 2 of Kenny Dillingham. A lot of his top recruits are still within their 4 to 5 years of eligibility. ASU does not have a robust class coming out this year. I think that's going to change. I think we're going to be talking about 2026, 2027. ASU, led by their quarterback, is going to be one of the most robust teams a la Colorado in the first and second round, day 1 and day 2. That's not the case this year. It was a Cam Skattebo-led offense. And again, what more can we say about him? 24 total touchdowns, 1,700 yards. He was their team, 5.8 yards per clip. I mean, there's something to be said about the offensive line was hit or miss. The defense knew who was getting the football every single play, especially on money running downs, and they still couldn't stop him. We're not sitting here and saying, even though he's a top 50 prospect to us, take him 47th overall. Right. But again, if you listen to our show, which I hope you do, he's somebody absolutely. Arizona Cardinals use a top 30 selection on him. It's a name that's worth watching for good reason, Bo.
Yeah, top 30 visit, as you meant there. What he we talked to Benjamin Albright. He didn't like kind of his first step, as he's getting the ball out of the backfield, and then Fran Duffy seems to agree with that in his breakdown, his thorough breakdown, his draft guide. And then you've got the non-breakaway speed. But is this a guy that you can use in short yardages? Also, he can be a guy that's going to embrace blocking, and whatever role he is going to kind of dealt the NFL level, he's going to be one of those guys that's going to show up to play. So Cam Skattebo, 47, too rich, but is he a 3rd round pick? Probably a 4th round pick. It's really going to be fascinating to see if he's there on the board. We're going to day 3 of the draft. 42nd on our list, Pat Tillman, his collegiate number there. Pretty nice there. I wanted a pair of defensive linemen here.
Yeah.
I know they're similar, but they're very different. Alfred Collins from Texas, and then from Tennessee, Omar Norman Lott. Start with Alfred Collins, big boy, 6'5", 332 pounds, 34.5-inch arms. Also, was part of that Texas team that made a run into the college football playoff. And then you got Omar Norman Lott, a little bit smaller, 6'1", 290, a little bit different defensive lineman. But I wanted to put him in there just because of a point you made on the show on Monday, where it's just like, if you don't get somebody on the interior of the defensive line, this is the type of athlete or defensive lineman that you're going to have, day 2, day 3.
Yeah, let's start with Collins. And I know you and I talked about him off air. I mean, I think he was helped by the pipeline now with these defensive tackles for Texas coming into the NFL and making such a significant impact. Of course, the kid that went 1st round, top 20 for Seattle last year. And then, of course, the kid that we were all down on, Tavondre Sweat, that went on, could have been Defensive Rookie of the Year for the Tennessee Titans at times this year. Collins, to me, where you have to be careful is if you're taking a kid at 47, can he do both, rush the passer and stop the run at a high level? He's an elite run defending defensive tackle. And that's outlined by our guy, Fran Duffy. You do wonder, as a fifth-year senior, where the juice is left to squeeze as a pass rusher. And if you're going to take a guy that high, you got to see him come to fruition with 4 or 5 sacks a year. His pro comp that I've seen a lot, Bo, at 6'5", 332, like an Ashawn Robinson. It was a solid player. But again, he himself, coming out of Alabama once upon a time, was never that impact, disrupting, penetrating 3 or 5 technique. And so Collins, to me, that would be a very safe pick. He can come in and produce right away. I think I would use the term pro ready for him, right? Come in and work next to Darius Robinson, who can penetrate. Same with Dalvin Tomlinson. But I think he's a couple years away at best from being somebody you can count on third down.
I'll speak to on this Norman Lott here. You look at him, you look at his stats, you're like, this guy never started as a senior, right? But he was a guy that played in a heavy rotation in Tennessee, similar like what they like to run in Arizona under Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rollis. And on a down-to-down basis, this guy was very productive. He's a 3 tech for the most part, where if you look at the Cardinals roster, like who's really going to kind of have that role? So like I think that becomes maybe necessity down the line. Like we know Dalvin Tomlinson could potentially, but does that fit his strength the best? Probably not. So do the Cardinals look to this draft to kind of fill that role? I think 47 is probably a bit rich, but could you get him in the 3rd round, 4th round? That'd probably be perfect.
I think Lott is a better prospect, Norman Lott, than Alfred Collins, just on the surface level. I think he's a better pass rusher. Again, you may not get, for lack of a better term, as many bullets in the chamber. But again, for Jonathan Gannon, who doesn't want to use his defensive lineman more than 60% of the snaps, this could be a dominant nose tackle to bookend Dalvin Tomlinson and, of course, Darius Robinson next year. So either player would help unequivocally. It's just going to come down to scheme fit and really, Bo, positioning and where you think their ceiling can be.
We talked about your boy, Captain Jack Sawyer, in our 100 to 51 prospects. Let's talk about his teammate, JT Tuimo Loau, who is actually pretty productive, actually led the Buckeyes in a national championship performance in sacks. A little bit, just as tall as his teammate, Jack Sawyer, but he's also a little more stout, like 270, 269 officially, a little bit longer arms. What do you think about JT? 3-year starter for the Buckeyes, big-time recruit, lived up to that. But he could play a little defensive end. He could play 5 to 7 technique in a 3-point stance. He just seems like a really versatile, athletic Buckeye that I really think would be a good option for the Cardinals if they don't go edge in the 1st round.
Yeah, he's got power, and you mentioned it, the size at 270. He is not a Mike Green kind of player, but 12.5 sacks. I don't care, how many games he played. I don't care what conference. That's productive. He was more productive than Captain Jack. I think he's a fringe 1st-round pick. Our guy, Fran Duffy's got him as edge 4. He's high on him. I think in a perfect world for the Arizona Cardinals, you either take him in a trade up at the beginning of day 2, which Austin Ford, he's traded down. Could he come up from 47 and get him? Or if you traded down in the 1st round, really down toward the back half, 25, 26, I wouldn't have an issue with taking him there either. I think he's got an incredibly high floor, and that's somebody that this guy may never be a 15-sack guy, but I think 8 to 12 sacks a year. I know we talked about a couple different prospects recently, like a Landon Jackson, comparing favorably to Josh Sweat. I actually think JT kind of reminds me of Sweat, where he's got, as Fran Duffy says, enough strength to fight through chips, not to be impactve, but a strong anchor. That sounds like Josh Sweat to me. Doesn't get beat on the edge, powered to get initial push against tackles, collapses the pocket. So again, you could do far worse. Again, I mentioned Landon Jackson. He's in that category, right? Where we get past the top 20 guys, and then we go into really 20 to about 45. And you could make a case for a lot of these guys based on scheme fit, age, measurables, of course, medical. That's all going to come into the equation. We might be sitting here and saying JT at 40, and there could be a team that takes him at 25. That would not be uncommon for a class with this much uncertainty.
Yeah. Like the motor, he's kind of just one of those guys that it seems like he's cut from the cloth that a lot of the players in that locker room already are. I think he would fit right in. And, oh, yeah, that Ohio State pipeline that has been established since Monty Ossenfort, Jonathan Gannon took the reins of the organization. Let's end with this one. You can look at our full top 100 right now as we go from 50 to 31. Let's look at our 34th ranked player. It's the left tackle out of Minnesota, Arante Ursi, who looked pretty good at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
He's a big boy, Johnny. He's at 6'6", 331 pounds, 33.5-inch length arms. Just looks good. Just ran about a 5 flat, 5.01 at 40, shuttle at 4.82, vert nearly 30 inches, and a broad just over 9 feet. So athletic for a big boy. That's definitely what you want from somebody who would be potentially playing right tackle for you for the next half decade.
Yeah, he's a freak show. This is not a kid that's coming into the NFL as like a ready-made product. I think that's the perfect scenario for a kid like this to go at 47 because you could sit him at least for a while behind Jonah Williams and Kelvin Beachum. He's played right tackle as a high school student, but then, of course, was a dominant left tackle for the Golden Gophers in the Big Ten. According to Fran Duffy, freak show athlete, should test well. It shows up on tape. Good play speed, gets out of his stance well. Surprising range to meet the rushers. He's a better pass protector than run blocker. Again, it's a common theme with a lot of these early round tackles. You have to be able to set up shop on third down and not give up much ground. So, again, I think this is somebody where, like Paris Johnson Jr. once upon a time, could he benefit from playing right away? Absolutely. Would you need to play him? No, I think you could slow play it. Maybe pull the Band-Aid off around Halloween if you were to take him at 47, or if you're happy with Jonah Williams one more year, you ride it out and have him ready to go in 2026. But again, day 2 feels like the avalanche of offensive linemen that we've been discussing, because outside of Membo and Campbell in the top 10, and maybe Kelvin Bakes Jr., it really feels like a lot of these guys are going to fall just based on the fact that it's not as strong of a unit as it was last year.
No, it's certainly not. But that was a pretty storic class.
It was.
And the Cardinals tried to dip their foot into it. I think they got an interior player, not somebody that's on the edge. If you get Ursi in the building, I don't think they have somebody outside of Paris Johnson Jr. with the projectables that he potentially has. And that'd be nice to be able to develop on a proper timeline. What's nice on a proper timeline is we've got more of these breakdowns of our PHNX Cardinals top 100 coming up next. We'll get into, of course, 29 through about 20. But who do you like the best out of the prospects we just broke down? From Donovan Jackson of Ohio State, Cam Skattebo, Arizona State, Omar Norman Lott, Alfred Collins, JT Tuimoloau, and Arante Ursi, the tackle from Minnesota. Let us know who you like out of this grouping. Who is just a Cardinal? Drop a like on this and subscribe to PHNX Sports. Follow Johnny and myself on Twitter at Johnny Venerable, at Bo Brack, and at PHNX_Cardinals. Talk to you soon.